Alright, hello. So today we're looking at 4 tools for making your own microtonal music, specifically creating the tuning systems yourself. When Ableton 12 released, it introduced the ability to natively run tuning systems within the DAW. This included stock synths to have the ability to be tuned, the ability to easily switch and choose what tuning systems you use, and finally, a way to get away from that max MIDI effect. I don't know why, but I never liked it. Now, you have a fairly large list of tuning systems to choose from, and even a way to edit or create them yourself with the Ableton tuning site, which we will get into. However, today we're looking at 4 different ways of making your own tuning systems, and with each 4 we're going to have a little Ableton jam with the tunings we made in each piece of software, so we can sort of hear how practical they are. The first 3 are free, however the last one is a paid software, which can also be used as a plugin. And I would really recommend sticking around to watch that last one, because it is phenomenal. Finally, this video came out on my Patreon a week ago, and also it came out with some extra tuning files to download. However, in the description of this video is a zip file with all the projects from this video and all the tuning systems from this video. But anyway, let's just get into it and check out all of these pieces of software. So, the first one we're starting out with is Ableton's own tuning editor. This is obviously free, and yeah, let's get into it. So you have a code window, and this is where you change the amount of notes, so we're going to choose 9, but now we're getting an error line. And thankfully, Ableton tells us exactly what this is and where it is, so we're just going to delete what it tells us to. We're getting another error now, but again, it tells us where and what it is, so that's okay. If you scroll down this window, it'll give you your pitch definitions where you can use cents or ratios, but we're just going to try and mess around, in all honesty. In the bottom of the code window, you can see ABL reference pitch, and 3 is the octave, 0 is the note, so 0 is C, 1 is C sharp, and then you have your frequency next to it. And obviously, the 0 to whatever for your note can only go up to however many notes you have in your scale. But again, Ableton will tell you that with an error message, and it's pretty easy to understand, but this is a long way of making scales, and there are other options, but we'll get into those in a bit. Here's how we sound. So those last few are sounding a bit close for me, so I'm just going to edit those again. They're a bit too close to each other. Sounding a bit better. We've also got a built-in sequencer, which is really nice, where you can try out some things. So let's try out how this sounds. It sounds like clown music, or haunted clown music, so let's just keep trying. I mean, it's definitely something. Alright, so now we just drag and drop it into Ableton once we've exported it. Let's grab an operator, and I'm just going to draw in something random, and hopefully it'll sound nice. And as you can hear, the scale's working perfectly, so let's get to making something. I'm just leaving right in this pattern only for this part of the video. The rest of them are fast forwarded, but I just want to show you how a lot of it is trial and error, for me anyway. But that's sounding pretty funky. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Alright, let's change our patch to be like a weird, broken, plucky thing. Changing our oscillator to a saw, just changing the frequency and the resonance and filter envelope. Just using the release of the oscillator to be different from the filter envelope, so it almost sounds not acoustic, but it sounds a bit metally. Adding in another oscillator to make it sound really harsh and broken. use a delay with a timed delay and a really low feedback, so it's almost creating its own new rhythms. Kind of like if you've heard Johnny Greenwood in The Smile with Thin Thing. So instead of just writing loads more MIDI, we're just going to use a delay. I think it sounds very cool. Now we're going to make a pad. Going to use Wavetable for this. Going to try and make it sound as broken as the pluck. So we've already found our root note, which is very nice. So personally, for me, I'm a beginner with writing microtonal music, and writing chords is a fun pain. So I prefer to just do it by ear, and again, it's a lot of trial and error. But, you know, you get the hang of it. So yeah, just use your ears. So, figured out the chords. I believe I'm about to change that last chord though, because that's a bit too dissonant. Again, as you can see, a lot of this is trial and error and experimenting. I'm just trying to figure out what you want. Especially as a beginner, you know, this is some of the first microtonal stuff I'm doing. But yeah, just getting a reverb in, and then an auto pan onto the pluck. Yeah, let's change that last chord. That's much better. And then we're just going to add in a drum break. This is the Blackbird's theme. I think it might be my favourite drum break. Then drum bus it, because it makes everything sound good. It's a bit goblin ravey, so this is our goblin rave track. And now we're just going to do some basic mixing, you know, EQ here and there. Just fixing ever so slightly some of the patches. Like here we're using the LFO to change the fold, I believe, yeah. And then chuck a bunch of beat repeats onto our drum break because we don't have to write the MIDI in right now. Bit compression on the master, and here's what we end up with. So, Ableton's own tuning editor has lots of instructions. The error window is amazing, and it really helps out, to be honest, because I've made a lot of errors when making this tuning. And the code is very versatile. It's pretty much as simple or complex as you make it, but I've just used it simply. And you can really just type in the cents. But by doing that, it is very tedious and long and can be quite frustrating. But it is a great place to start, especially if you want to get into text-based code, I guess. Because I know you can use this in Max MSP as well, so this is a kind of more friendly way to start. However, other options are easier and more intuitive, so we're going to go into those next. The Sevish Scale workshop, and you've probably heard of this one. This is amazing. So, first of all, if you're using Chrome, I've installed this as an app to use offline. I'd highly recommend doing that. Anyway, here's what you're introduced with. As you can see, we have a scale data window like Ableton's one, but let's create an equal temperament tuning with 9 divisions, and let's put our octave to be divided 3/1. And let's see how that sounds. Oh, that's nasty. Let's change our synth a bit. The internal synth in here is really nice. I like using the warm oscillators. They sound very sort of Aphex Twins window licker or drugs era. It's very nice. But this scale or this tuning I'm not a massive fan of. So look at this modify section. This is amazing. We can modify the scale just by clicking a few buttons and it'll do stuff. So let's try to equalize it. by 12 divisions. Okay, we have a nice chord. Sounds quite nice. Let's it's still sounding a bit harsh for me, so let's try and modify it again with stretch and compress. So let's have our reference interval be 7/12, and our target interval be 4/7, I guess. Calculate it. We have our stretch ratio. Sure, let's go. I can't really hear a difference, but I mean, the frequencies did change a bit, I think. Let's just create a new scale and try this subharmonic series one with our lowest subharmonic being 8 and our highest 16. That sounds nice. And there's enough weird stuff in there. So now, let's change our bass frequency to 432 because, you know, we're healing hippies now. Sorry. And then we can just export it specifically as an Ableton scale. So let's bring in Wavetable real quick and just make some patches. I want this to sound big, so quad saw should do. Yeah, that sounds like it could be big. I'm just going to edit it quite a lot to be a big sounding pad, add in some other oscillators and use the noise unison to make it sound massive. Yeah, that's sounding good. Here are our effects, bunch of EQs, auto filter, some parallel processing with a reverb, echo and erosion, and then the dry signal and some multiband dynamics. Alright, now let's drag our scale in and try and figure out some chords. You'll see in this video that I have quite an issue of figuring out chords with odd tuning systems. But this is sounding surprisingly pretty. Now we're just going to kind of use MP to pitch bend some notes in that last chord because, I don't know, it's sounding a bit too pretty, so let's mess it up a bit. Yeah, I like that. Alright, let's make another patch. This one's going to be a weirdish pluck, and we're going to mess around a lot with drawing in our oscillator with operator. This is what we end up with. I quite like that. Just changing the filter envelope and spread. Bringing in another oscillator here to make it sound a bit broken. Sounds a bit like a Nintendo 64 sound thing, but anyway. Copy our chords over, split up those chords into whatever division you want, and then we can arpeggiate certain sections, which I'm just going to carry on doing. You will need Live 12 to split the notes like that, is when you highlight something and press Command or Control-E on Windows. Just transposing them up an octave because it's easier than just trying to find where the octave is with a scale that doesn't have a perfect octave with 12 notes, if that makes sense. Anyway, just going to carry on arpeggiating certain parts of each chord. We're specifically using the clip arpeggiator instead of the MIDI effect. But here's how it sounds. The last chord coming up sounds quite off, but I'm happy with that. Sounds a bit sickening. So yeah, I'm happy with that. We've added in a delay instead of using a send, and now let's add a reverb as well, and some shimmer just to bring up that octave again. And then this is how we're sounding, and we're just going to do some very basic EQ to the end of all of that chain. Okay, so let's make another patch now. This is going to be bass, and again, instead of finding the octave, we're just going to transpose it down by 2 octaves. Going to try and make an almost Reese bass kind of thing, so set your algorithm to the one that's just horizontal. Can't remember what it's called. And then copy oscillator A to oscillator B and slightly detune them from one another. This is how we end up sounding, which I think sounds quite nice. Gonna add a multi-band raw onto it as well, and a chorus. And then copy the chords over, but delete every note except for the bottom, so we have a root note in there. Right, now this is what we've got on our master output. Again, bit of basic EQ, multi-band dynamics. Now let's make some drums. I'm just going to use a DS kick, have it play on the 1 and 3. Next thing I'm going to bring in is something I made a while back called Cool Op Perk. It's just an operator again, and it uses a few things in expression control, I believe, and if I remember correctly, it changes the algorithm of operator, the decay, I believe there's a corpus on there, a flanger, I don't know. Again, all the projects are in the description, so it's available to download. We're going to add in this Cool Op Perk now. We're just going to draw in a basic little pattern. I mean, you can kind of hear how it generates a different sound for itself. And then we're going to add in some water foley because it sounds nice. So, the Sevish Scale workshop is an amazing place to start making scales. The amount of options it has to help you start off is amazing, and the modify section makes it even better because it's easily modifiable. And you can write the code for the scala file, or you can generate it with the previous 2 options. But it might feel a little random at first, and there's a lot of trial and error, but all in all it's worth it. And a lot of happy accidents will happen. So yeah, it's free. try it out. Also, Sevish has some amazing music, and I've put the link in the description to some of his music, and there should be a little card up the top here. Alright, so this next one we're looking at is called Leimma, and Leimma is probably the easiest one. So you just click create a new tuning system and already you're at your reference pitch. You can just click and drag where you want your reference pitch to be and what note it should be, and that's it. Then click next, and cool, here is where you create your notes. You just click the grey bar. Also, that upper bar with the lines on it is great, because that's a very easy way to make quarter tones if you just do it on every single line. And then just hover your mouse over each line so you can hear your note in scale. You can also click the lines so you can add cents or change the ratio. Click update and bam, that's it. And then just click next again and we get taken to this wheel. This is where you can assign notes for each frequency you have put in the graph or the chart. Like here we can use this as C and so on. But as we're using Ableton to play our scale, we're just going to export the tuning system. Alright, so now we're just going to try and make, I don't know, like an eerie 90s IDM track using a lot of FM synthesis. So 2 oscillators, spread them, and yeah, we're just going to keep on making it. And I think that's about it for that patch. It sounds like it's feeding back into itself, but it isn't. And now, again, the ever-present issue of trying to figure out chords with scales. But here we go. Oh, there's also definitely a bit of noise in that patch too. Chuck a bit of Redux on it to make it sound more harsh and more digital. And now we're just going to draw in some panning envelopes to each clip. We're using follow actions again, just because I think that's the easiest way to write chord progressions personally. Now we're just going to design some operator drums. These are going to be very similar if you've seen my Ryoji Ikeda video or my first Auteca video. They're very much the same, in all honesty. Most of it is 2-voice FM stuff, and we end up with this pattern. Also adding a click into it, again a bit like the Ryoji Ikeda video. We're also changing the probability of those click 16ths and changing the panning. Now just doing some basic mixing with multiband dynamics. Alright, making another patch now. This one's going to be like a pluck chord kind of thing. And we've copied the chords over to it as well. But we're going to go into our MIDI effects and get the note echo. So as you can hear, it works like a normal delay, but instead of it being audio, it's triggering the MIDI as if the MIDI is a delay if you haven't used it before. But now we're going to grab an expression control and put it after the note echo, so the note echo is triggering the expression control. And then we're going to put random onto remote and then set that to the delay time. Brings out some kind of nice generative-ish polyrhythms, maybe? I don't know, maybe they're just rhythms, but I think they sound nice. Messing with the decay here as well, we're also going to map that to an expression control random. But we are going to mess with the remote percentages. And now we're going to copy the chords over to our new operator track as well, which is just, we're going to transpose our operator track down too. And then same as the previous jams, we're going to remove the top note of each chord so we can have a root note bass. Adding Redux onto it again, just to kind of make it sound loud with the higher frequencies from Redux. Now on our drums, we're EQing out a lot of frequencies and creating a kind of resonant bandpass, which is going into a reverb. We're also chucking a doubler on there, why not? And that's how it sounds all together with the parallel processing of the dry signal. Alright, another operator track, and we're going to do like an eerie lead. We're going to use the MPE to bend the notes as well. This took me quite a while, but here it is. It sounds kind of out of tune and gross and ooh. We also transpose it up, I think, 2 octaves, but I don't think the footage is in there actually, so my bad. Now we're just writing some more drum patterns. This one is all 16ths with all low probability, so it's kind of doing its own thing, which I think is fun. Write another drum pattern in, set the follow actions to other, or any, doesn't matter. Adding some echo and stuff to that eerie lead here. And yeah, just editing until I'm happy with it, to be honest. Definitely adding raw onto it as well, in the multi-band setting, so we can really boost some of the higher frequencies, especially with the noise distortion. It sounds amazing. Get some feedback on there too, and we end up with this. So, Leimma. It is incredibly easy to create tunings because it's just clicking, so it's very intuitive as well. It's not as accurate or detailed as other tools like Sevish, or the tool we're going to show after this, and to be honest, the internal synth sucks. But again, it's free, and if you just want a quick and easy tuning to make, then I'd highly recommend the Leimma Tuning Creator. This is Entonal Studio. It is a paid software, about £85. This is your first window, the information window. This is for 12-tet at the moment. This is your radial graph, where you can see every note and its relative harmonics. This is where a lattice would appear, depending on your tuning system. Then you had detailed note information and a key mapping area for when you make your own scales. So we're just going to try out some presets using this internal synth, which is amazing, by the way. It's got a few oscillators, ADSR, tone control, and a delay. So yeah, let's have a listen to some of the preset tunings in Entonal Studio. So just to show how easy it is to alter tunings, you can just click and drag the notes you're using. And this little menu down here allows snapping to EDO or prime limit, and you can change those. So as you can see, when I drag the note, it's snapping to a prime limit of 5. I don't really know what that means, but it's snapping and it sounds nice. So let's turn snapping off, and oh yeah, that's the harmonics, and relative intervals show up when you play chords. But this is with snapping off, and listen to how smooth this is. But let's create a new equal temperament tuning with 9 divisions and the size of the octave at 3. Why not? And now if we can force snap it to the EDO 12, it changes how everything sounds. But now let's create a new empty tuning. So you get taken here, so our octave is 2/1, and this is where you can put in your root frequency. So now let's type in 1/1, and then the rest I'm going to do is by sense, I believe. I'm also going to use a mix of manual and automatic mapping so I can set our notes to 11. I'm just going to keep adding some more, but now I'm using this in the most simple way possible. But you can even do maths equations, like watch this video from the creator.
We can also enter mathematical expressions. So if we wanted to add 2 just intonation intervals together, we could do it like this. 5/4 times 3/2 is the equivalent of adding them together.
That's fucking mad. I failed maths, but here's our scale. Sounds kind of bluesy, I like it. And now we can just edit it a bit more in here. The radial graph is amazing, and as you can see, our relative intervals are now showing up. Okay, so now you can just click Save As, and that's it. I'd normally export the Scala, however I have some issues with Entonal Studio Scala files and Ableton Scala files, so I use it as a MIDI effect instead. So if we drag it into a MIDI channel and then grab an instrument, I'm going to grab Wavetable, and make sure you set your monitoring to in, and then check that our pitch bend range is the same in the MIDI effect and our synth, and let's just check it's working. Yeah, that sounds good. And now we're going to put Entonal Studio to Group A, so every instance of Entonal Studio that is in Group A will match up with each other, even if you're bending notes. So now I'm just going to make a quick weird pluck once again. If you can't tell, I think that microtonal music and weird plucky sounds go hand in hand. Now we're just going to draw in a rhythm. Now I'm just editing what is already there and adding a few more notes, which are 30-second notes. If you've seen my Aphex Twin Cyro video, then we're writing this the same way we wrote the bass in that. I think this sounds quite funky. But yeah, as you can see, we're using Entonal to receive... We're using Wavetable to receive the MIDI from Entonal Studio. And that's how it works as a MIDI effect. But anyway, adding some reverb. Then some gated delay, a filter and an echo on a separate channel. Or a separate chain, sorry. Alright, now I'm going to group these two together just to be a bit neat and title this Wavetable 1. And we're just going to repeat the process again. Set this Entonal Studio to A. Route the MIDI correctly. Set our wavetable to monitoring in. And now, again, trying to find some fucking chords that work. This one took me a long time. So I do apologise, but... Oh, I've stopped. Why have I stopped? Oh, I had to pick up a parcel. Yeah, sorry, someone rang my doorbell then. Could have edited that out. My bad. But here's what we end up with. Again, follow actions. I love it. And again, as you can see, Entonal Studio is playing the MIDI and sending it to Wavetable. Now we're just adding some spectral time as a kind of uncanny delay effect. I think this effect is massively underrated. Also some raw again, but mid-side this time. I find that using raw on mid-side really helps muddiness for some reason. Also changing the feedback amount with our noise LFO or noise oscillator. Alright, setting up this again, we're using the bass from that Aphex Twin Syro video now. And again, setting Entonal Studio to group A. And now we're just writing this in the same way we wrote the plugin, where you just get a rhythm you like and just figure it out as you go along. Now, I made these drums. If you saw my YouTube short or my Instagram reel about Aphex Twin Collapse EP drums, they were done with this. The top 3 pads of this drum rack are triggered effects, which are done using envelope followers and stuff, but it's in the project file you can download, so if you want that, go for it. It's free, why not? And then we end up with this. Entonal Studio is incredibly detailed, amazing visual aids, especially that radial graph. The grouped instances are amazing when working in a DAW because you can just switch tuning systems in and out like it's nothing. Snapping, dragging and editing are phenomenal, completely easy to make tuning systems of your own, but this is expensive and I have issues exporting the Scala files to match up with Ableton, but that might just be me because I'm still new to this. So give it a go if you can. I believe there's a demo. Try it out.